The Silent Tragedy. Why we stopped thinking critically. Orwell's Animal Farm. Imagine waking up one day and realizing that most of what you believe, what you repeat, and even what you defend with passion was never truly your own thought. Imagine discovering that the opinions you hold most tightly were not born from reflection, but from repetition. That is the silent tragedy of modern society, the illusion of thinking without ever truly thinking. Today, we will explore one of the most profound and dangerous questions of our time. Why doesn't modern society think critically anymore? And to do that, we will dive into the brilliant allegory written by George Orwell, Animal Farm, a story that reveals not just the corruption of power, but the gradual death of independent thought. Stay with me until the end, because the last insight we'll uncover is the most powerful one of all, one that might change how you see the world forever. The erosion of original thought. Think about this. When was the last time you questioned something you believed in? Not because someone told you to, but because you felt it might not be true. For many people, it has been a long, long time. Orwell predicted this mental stagnation decades ago, long before the age of social media and algorithmic noise. Through Animal Farm, he showed how a society can slowly surrender its capacity to think until obedience feels like wisdom. At first glance, it's a simple story of rebellion, but beneath the surface lies one of the most disturbing mirrors ever held up to humanity. The animals begin with noble ideals: freedom, equality, justice. But over time, they allow the pigs to reshape their beliefs, one commandment at a time, until truth itself becomes flexible, manipulated, and redefined. Sound familiar? In our modern world, the same process unfolds daily. Ideologies, corporations, media giants, and influencers reshape our perceptions not through violence, but through constant repetition. Orwell once wrote that if thought corrupts language, language can also corrupt thought. That is exactly how control works. By changing words, we change meaning. By repeating slogans, we stop questioning. And when questioning dies, freedom follows. Ask yourself, when did society trade curiosity for convenience? We scroll endlessly, consume headlines without context, and defend narratives we barely understand. The speed of information has surpassed the depth of understanding. Just like the animals on the farm, we are promised equality and progress. But gradually, the words lose their weight. All animals are equal, the pig said, but some animals are more equal than others. Today, that distortion lives on in new forms. Political slogans, viral branding, corporate values, even the way we define truth online. Psychologists like Erich Fromm warned of this escape from freedom, the idea that when freedom becomes too heavy, people unconsciously surrender it for comfort and order. Carl Jung added that society prefers to live in collective illusions because individuality demands responsibility. Critical thinking is not comfortable. It demands awareness, effort, and courage. And so most people choose the easier path, obedience disguised as understanding. Here is the danger. When we stop thinking critically, someone else begins thinking for us. Whether it's an influencer, a political figure, or an algorithm, something is always waiting to fill the vacuum left by our passivity. That's what Orwell meant when he described propaganda not as a flood of lies, but as the slow erosion of truth. When truth becomes relative, control becomes invisible. The animals didn't lose their freedom overnight. It happened through small, gradual changes. The rewriting of the rules, the reshaping of memory, the constant reminder that questioning authority was dangerous. This perhaps is Orwell's most haunting insight, that tyranny begins not with violence but with intellectual laziness. A population that no longer asks why is easy to rule. A mind that no longer doubts is easy to deceive. And a person who no longer reflects becomes, without realizing it, part of the very machinery that enslaves them. The fences inside the mind. If Animal Farm teaches us anything, it is that control is rarely imposed by force. It is accepted through belief. The animals remained enslaved because they believed the new system was better than the old one. Modern society mirrors this pattern. Instead of physical control, we are shaped by psychological conditioning, subtle, almost invisible forces that influence our desires, fears, and even our sense of identity. The philosopher Michel Foucault described this as soft power, the power that doesn't need violence because it makes people willingly conform. Think about information today. Algorithms learn what you like, amplify it, and feed it back to you, creating a perfectly designed illusion of truth. You stop questioning because everything you see confirms what you already believe. And when everything you believe feels right, you mistake comfort for clarity. That is how critical thinking dies, not in conflict, but in comfort. In the farm, the pigs modified the commandments one by one. No animal shall sleep in a bed with sheets. Each distortion felt small, harmless, even reasonable. But together they built a new reality. Doesn't that echo how modern society redefines language today? How truth becomes a matter of narrative and freedom, a matter of branding? Jordan Peterson once said, "The price of freedom is the ability to bear responsibility." Critical thought requires the courage to face discomfort, to question our biases, and to accept that our favorite opinions might be wrong. But most people, as Carl Jung noted, prefer the security of collective thinking, the illusion that if everyone believes something, it must be true. Ask yourself, when you post an opinion online, whose voice are you really echoing? Is it yours, or the voice of the group that shaped your thoughts long before you expressed them? Orwell understood that the most effective form of control is not to silence speech, but to shape the language that makes speech possible. Once language becomes limited, thought follows. In the digital era, censorship is no longer just political, it's psychological. People censor themselves to fit in, to be accepted, to avoid being cancelled. In this way, the farm has no physical fences, because the fences now live inside the mind. There is a concept called groupthink, where the desire for harmony leads to irrational decisions. People suppress doubts to maintain unity, even when the truth is obvious. That's what happened on the farm. Today, it happens when we see contradictions in our systems, yet prefer silence to discomfort. Orwell's message is clear. Real rebellion begins when you stop repeating and start reflecting. Why does thinking critically feel so difficult today? Because we are bombarded with more information than ever before, yet less meaning. We live in a world of simulations where signs and symbols replace reality itself. As Jean Baudrillard warned, every time we react without reflection, we become more predictable, more programmable, more like the animals Orwell described, busy, obedient, and unaware. The hidden engine of conformity, fear and emotion. Think for a moment about what truly controls people. It's not always power or money, it's fear. Fear of exclusion, fear of being wrong, fear of standing alone. That is the hidden engine behind conformity. In Animal Farm, the animals obey not only because they are deceived, but because they are afraid. Afraid of the return of the humans, afraid of punishment, afraid of uncertainty. Their fear becomes the perfect tool of control. Today, we fear being irrelevant, unheard, or disconnected. Social media has transformed these ancient fears into daily rituals of validation. Each like, each comment is a small approval from the collective that whispers, "You belong." But belonging comes at a cost. The gradual surrender of individuality. This is why modern propaganda is not just political, it's emotional. It doesn't tell you what to think. It makes you feel something so strongly that you stop questioning it. The animals loved the feeling of belonging they got from singing the farm's anthem. The more they believed, the more their chains disappeared in their minds. The tragedy of our time is that the more emotionally charged our world becomes, the outrage, the fear, the envy, the less room we have for rational thought. Neuroscientists like Antonio Damasio proved that emotion is essential for decision-making, but when emotion overwhelms logic, it blinds judgment. Modern society thrives on that imbalance. A mind controlled by emotion is easier to steer than one guided by reason. Ask yourself, when you encounter information online that makes you angry, do you stop to analyze it, or do you instantly react? Daniel Kahneman showed that attention is the most valuable currency. The one who controls attention controls perception, and the one who controls perception controls reality. In Animal Farm, the slogans, "Napoleon is always right," "4 legs good, 2 legs bad," bypassed reason and created loyalty through repetition. Today, marketing and media rely on the same formula. Nietzsche warned that convictions are more dangerous enemies of truth than lies, because once a conviction feels like identity, it can no longer be challenged. Carl Jung called this the mass mind, where the individual merges into the collective and loses the ability to think independently. In that state, people don't ask, "Is this true?" They ask, "Will I be accepted if I say this?" That is how societies sleepwalk into tyranny, through millions of small acts of silent compliance. But awareness begins when we recognize that our emotions can be manipulated. Fear can be weaponized. The moment we see these mechanisms for what they are, the illusion begins to crack. Søren Kierkegaard once said that, "Anxiety is the dizziness of freedom." To think critically is to stand on the edge of that dizziness, to face the infinite complexity of truth without retreating into comforting lies. It's not about having all the answers, but about learning to live with questions. The path to freedom, solitude and sincerity. There comes a moment in every story when truth is no longer hidden, only ignored. In Animal Farm, that moment arrives when the animals look through the farmhouse window and can no longer tell the difference between pigs and humans. The oppressed forgot how to see. So, how do we reclaim it? How do we begin to think critically again in a world that profits from our distraction? The first step is sincerity toward ourselves. Critical thinking is not just a skill, it's a moral discipline. It begins when you decide to pause and question not only what you see, but why you see it. Jiddu Krishnamurti said, "It is no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society." True critical thought requires the courage to be unadjusted, to stand apart and to question loudly. To think critically, we must be brutally honest. Are we seeking truth, or are we seeking confirmation? The second step is to cultivate solitude, not isolation but silence, the space where thought can breathe. In a world of endless noise, solitude has become the new luxury. Every notification, every headline steals a piece of your mental clarity. But in silence you begin to hear your own voice again. Nietzsche called it the loneliness of the thinker. The third step is curiosity. Children are born philosophers, but our systems train us to replace curiosity with certainty. The moment you stop asking why, your mind begins to age. Curiosity is the antidote to manipulation. In Animal Farm, the donkey Benjamin represents the tragedy of awareness without action. He sees through the lies, but he remains silent. 2. Think critically is not just to understand. It is to act upon understanding. It is to speak truth even when silence is safer. How to apply this daily. The next time something outrages you online, pause before you respond. Ask, who benefits from my anger? When you hear a claim that feels comforting, ask, what truth might this be hiding? When everyone around you agrees on something, ask, "What am I not seeing?" These simple acts of questioning reopen the gates of the mind. They turn passive spectators back into conscious participants in reality. Critical thinking is the art of seeing clearly in a world built to blur your vision. It's the ability to hold two opposing ideas and still search for truth between them. It's the courage to say, "I don't know," in a culture obsessed with certainty. Orwell leaves us with the haunting question, will we too wait until it's too late to see the pigs at the table? Or will we awaken now, while we still can? The power to change society begins in the silent, invisible revolution of the individual mind. Each time you choose awareness over reaction, reflection over opinion, truth over comfort, you plant a seed of freedom. Orwell's final call: freedom is the right to tell people what they do not want to hear. That freedom begins inside you. Guard it, exercise it, live it. Because a world where no one thinks critically is a world where truth dies quietly, and only those who dare to see can bring it back to life.